Hello and a very warm welcome to moneycontrol.com. As part of our budget special series, we are trying to understand what the government should do in its last budget before it goes for general elections. What should its priorities be? And of course, what are the challenges that this budget will have to address? To understand this in further detail, we have with us Dr. D.K. Joshi, Chief Economist of Crisil. Mr. Joshi, thank you very much for joining us. Always a
A
pleasure to
pleasure to
have
be
you.
here.
Always a pleasure. So, let me begin by asking you. This is going to be a challenging budget for the government because you have elections coming, plus you have a recession that's staring at us from all sides, whether it's the UK or the US. So, what are the key things or the key challenges that you think that the government will have to address in this budget?
Well, I think as you rightly pointed out, the economic backdrop has turned challenging, and the global environment looks bleaker because of very high interest rate hikes and the recession, particularly in the advanced countries, not so much in the emerging markets, but advanced countries are very important for us because I think a large part of our exports goes to advanced countries. So that is, I think, is going to create a downward drag on our growth next year. So one challenge is that this year we expect 7% real GDP growth, 15% nominal GDP growth because inflation has been higher. For next fiscal year, we expect growth to go down to 6% in real terms and inflation to be lower. So you will have a much lower nominal GDP growth. So your tax collections will be not as smooth as this year because of the base of tax collections will not increase at the same pace. So that is, I think, that is one constraint that you'll have to work with. The other issues are, I think, the to ensure that the domestic demand, I think, remains resilient in the face of external demand playing a spoil sport. Now, so that I think is going to occupy a large part of what measures the budget announces. I mean, so and how they plan to do it, I think, whether through investments or through supporting the weaker sections. But I think while they do this, they also have to ensure that the deficit reduction is on track as they had envisaged in the last budget.
Okay. So you're saying that they need to work with lower growth, lower tax collections for next year. So their fiscal math needs to reflect all of that. Yet they need to follow a path of fiscal consolidation. So no overspending. That they have to resist the urge to spend a lot right before the elections.
That's true. I think going by the past experience, I think the government has been conservative on spending. I think they have tried to make the spending as targeted as possible, and I think
Mhm.
that is what you will have to follow through in this year also. I think the I do believe that they should continue with the momentum on public spending, which is or public investments, because it has multiplier effects on the economy. I think infrastructure will help us over the short run as well as over the medium run by raising the growth potential. But on the revenue side, I think they might have to now start looking at scaling back the food subsidy program, which currently benefits about 800 million people. So that, I think, and then if we are lucky, global crude prices, etc., and fertilizer prices stay low, then I think the fertilizer bill also will be lower. So I think a lot depends on how the situation, which is very fluid, how it plays out. So my sense is that I think rationalization of expenditure will also become a priority for the government this year.
Mr. Joshi, help me understand. Last year, in fact, last 2 years, we've seen a whole host of social sector schemes that have been introduced to ease the pain at the grassroots level. Considering the state that we are in right now, inflation is still a sticky issue. We are looking at a recession. There have been job losses. Do you think the government should go ahead and reduce some of those schemes? Or do you think there is scope to introduce more schemes such as an urban Manrega, which has been on the wish list for many economists for a very long time now?
Well, I would see the urban part of the economy, I believe, is benefiting disproportionately from the opening of the services sector, because the services are two-thirds of them are in the urban areas. So there is, I think, so some of the pain that the urban economy went through, particularly the lower income brackets during the COVID and during the recovery phase, I think the that pain has reduced this year because of a very strong revival in services. Now, I think I would say that if you have to do this, you have to start it on a pilot basis. I think check it out how it works. But the need to do it is this year is much less than it was last year.
Okay, that's encouraging. So, need for an urban Manrega is lesser this year than last year. We're also looking at bumper tax collections, much beyond what the government had expected. Um, uh, Overarchingly, do you expect the government to continue with its push towards privatization, disinvestment? Are these the areas that you think the government should be focusing on and they could be focusing on?
Yeah, I think privatization is a difficult nut to crack. I think we've seen that. But I think they should continue with the process of divesting, which they have started, and I think that is the way ahead. As much as you can achieve, they've cracked some tough nuts also, like Air India. I mean, which was I thought that was a big achievement. I mean, privatizing it. So I think that would take place, but it won't be a great source of revenue. I mean, that's I think, but it will generate efficiency in the system once it changes hands. So that process should privatization should continue. The other thing I think which government can think of is the PLI scheme has been pretty successful, so to say. Uh, and I think what it has done is the manufacturing investments which would have otherwise not happened, they have been fast forwarded because of the incentives. See, the private sector has the money to invest. Their is very low. Their cash balances are strong, so they can go in for an investment push. But the uncertainty is so much right now. I think that they will be a little wary. So now I think to nudge them towards investments is some kind of support helps, particularly if it is strategically aligned to make India a manufacturing hub. I think which the government now plans to. I think, and we are also looking at some of the investments coming to us because the supply chains get diversified. I think with that in mind, I think supporting some part of manufacturing strategically, I think will also be helpful, but that will have to come from the budget. I mean, you need money for that.
Hmm. Okay, if you could zoom out a little bit, Dr. Joshi, if you could just tell us, in terms of fiscal math of the government, what are the areas that you feel that the government will do okay on, and what are the red flags according to you?
Well, for this year, I think the subsidy bill is, of course, bloated. I think now the that is because one, I think because we had to extend the food subsidy bill. Second, because the global fertilizer prices went up so much that I think you had to provide subsidies to cushion the farmers. So a very bloated subsidy bill this year, I think is a red flag. Now the counterfactual would have been that if the subsidy bill had not been that high, you would have ended up with more public investments. I think government would have had more resources to spend on the right areas. So I think for this year, I would say that the best part of the budget has been that or fiscal exercise has been that the revenues have surprised. I think revenue, and this is a tribute to GST, which initially was very cumbersome but has got streamlined and is now paying off. The second, I think, highlight is that government kept its foot on the accelerator as far as the public investment, infrastructure investment is concerned. I think that is a major highlight. And then I think it's also a highlight that they managed to support a large part of the population through food subsidy, etc. I think in difficult times. Now, what I'm saying is that the times, this budget is always a balancing act. I think you have to ensure fiscal balance. At the same time, you have to ensure that the support is provided to the very needy. I think so that balancing act, how it plays out, I think we need to watch out for that. But there are, I think, the major red flag that they need to now start crimping, I think, is on the subsidy front.
Interesting. And you think that we are placed we are far more comfortably placed that the government can actually do something that could be politically very difficult to do, and it could require, it could get the government into a lot of criticism.
Yeah, I think, but what I'm saying is the 800 million people are being currently supported. Just start scaling it down a bit. I mean, so that I think you'll have to do, because eventually you can't do that uh, forever. I mean, so you will need to start scaling it. I mean, work out a transition plan for reducing it to the comfortable level. Maybe I think you need to work out, maybe not all 800 million people require food subsidy support.
Okay, how much of a concern is inflation according to you, and is that impacting consumption, or do you feel that consumption has kept up with the pace of economy that we've seen in the last few months?
Yeah, consumption is lopsided clearly. I think the high ticket items, I think high income categories, they are the ones who are able to consume. The consumption in lower ticket items, I think whether you take the automobile sector or other discretionary spending, I think is much lower. So there is, I think that there is a K shape which is visible, and we also know that inflation hits the poor most, because they spend a large part of their of income on food and on energy. So and we have computed inflation levels for lower income categories and upper income categories, and lower income categories clearly face somewhat higher inflation than the upper income categories, and that is where the food subsidy element came in. Now, how worried I am about inflation? Well, there are two, three positive signs. One is that crude oil prices have started easing, and I think if the geopolitics do not play spoil sport, I think we could see easing of fuel inflation. Second, on the food front, I think the Rabi prospects look pretty good, because the sowing is very good. There is enough soil moisture. On top of that, the reservoir levels are pretty strong. So that what that means, that you are looking towards a possibility of a bumper harvest for Rabi. Now, the only worry on that front is that if you get a heat wave, I mean, as you got earlier this year, I mean, what it will do to production. So that, I think, climate related challenge is always there. But if that doesn't happen, I would see food and fuel inflation come down. Core inflation, which I think the central bank governor also alluded to, is very sticky, because the producers have faced high input costs, and they are now trying to pass it on to the end consumer as much as they can. So controlling core inflation becomes the territory of RBI. They cannot influence food and fuel inflation. So when they are tightening monetary policy, I think they are trying to ensure that core inflation doesn't go out of hand. In fact, it comes down. So I think that's on the inflation side. Yeah, but I would say that we expect, if you want the numbers, we expect consumer inflation at 5% in the next fiscal year, compared to our estimate of 6.8% in this fiscal year.
Okay, that's encouraging. Well, how about your other estimates in terms of fiscal deficit, in terms of revenue collections? What kind of estimates are you working with?
Well, I think we haven't done the math as yet, but yeah, for GDP, I think, as I said, we will work with a assumption of 11% nominal GDP growth compared to 15% this year, which means somewhat lower tax collections. We'll also, I think, look at the fiscal deficit being scaled down from 6.4% to 6%, around 6%. I think so. You are on the glide path, and I think so. These are the big picture items on the budget. And I think the underlying mathematics, I think we are still in the process of forming our own budget. I mean, what it should look like.
Okay, I want to talk to you about climate change. It's a big issue, and this year we saw onion prices that could have gone up, but the harvest of onions was pretty poor. The prices didn't go up because, like you were sharing with me, that NAFED released a lot of onions into the market. Uh, do you think this budget? I mean, how can this budget address climate change in terms of specifically in terms of manufacturing and agriculture?
Sure. See, I think there is no doubt that India is very vulnerable to climate change. I think we are one of the most impacted. And the first impact comes on agriculture, which is about 17-18% of our GDP. And 40% of the population directly or indirectly is associated with agriculture. So it is, and as I said, food inflation is always a tricky thing for India. Now, so what you need to you cannot change the direction of the wind, as they say, but you can adjust your sails. So I think the budget can help adjust the sails a bit by doing a couple of things. I mean, by focusing more on the food processing side to smoothen the price impact, to by focusing on creating incentives for new varieties of crops which are extreme weather resistant. I think these are the things which will pay off over the long run, and also by, I think, improving warehousing facility, etc. Now, this year, the onion example that you gave, I think typically onion prices would have flared had it not been for the release of onions in the market through by government. So I think that
Right.
actually, so this is a good example of how you can smoothen the price volatility, even if there is an extreme weather. I mean, the excess rains in October did impact the crop quite a bit. So I would say that I think there has to be now more focus on ensuring that the agriculture risk is mitigated, because the climate change impact is there. I mean, you can't correct that, but you can at least adjust yourself to brace. You can brace for facing it in a much better way. Coming to manufacturing, I think, see, India's growth model so far had been, we moved from agriculture to services. We actually kind of missed the boat on the manufacturing side for a number of years, because manufacturing
Right.
share in GDP remained where it was. Now we are trying to move towards manufacturing, I think, and looking at opportunities that come from diversification of supply chains. And manufacturing and infrastructure creation are very energy intensive and also very carbon intensive, because steel, cement, these require a lot of energy to produce. And similarly, manufacturing is generally more energy intensive than services. So now, given that we are very vulnerable, given that you have commitments to the carbon decarbonization, so you will have to start the process of supporting manufacturing sector transition towards the green means of producing. So now I think there the large companies are well placed. So the smaller, the medium and small enterprises, which are a large part of the production process in the manufacturing as well, I think they will be the ones that will need more access to green finance, more support, so that they are able to transition to the near cleaner modes of production. So I think that support can only come from the budget. I mean, so I think maybe a little, we are talking about it, maybe a little more needs to be done, and maybe it needs to be fast forwarded to ensure that the budget also has a green element which is visible.
Okay, Mr. Joshi, so this is going to be this government's last budget before it goes for elections. What would you like to see it as? Do you want to see it as a bold budget or an incremental budget, which has been largely the approach of this government? And which has been your favorite budget so far in the last 9 years? Any specific
Well, I
budget
think
that you feel has been very landmark?
Well, I think all the budgets have been, fiscally responsible, I would say. I think so. I'm not picking up any favorites, but I would want this budget to be bold for two, three reasons, I think. Number one, I think India has a strong growth narrative. It's despite global headwinds, I think we are perched we have some structural strengths. I think if you want to cash in on those structural strengths, I think you need bold measures. I mean, by structural strengths, I mean your financial sector is extremely healthy right now. The NPA levels are low, banks are well capitalized, so it can lubricate the economy much, much better. Your corporate sector has cleaned up its balance. It has reduced its debt, so its leverage is low. It has cash balances. That will help it cushion against the global headwinds and also permit investments when the situation becomes more conducive. So in this environment, I think, and digitalization, fast forwarding has helped us so much in improving the payment systems, in improving the delivery of goods to people. I think all those things are very strong, and I think in favor of India. So if you want to cash in on that, I think you need bold measures from the government. So I would be looking for a bold budget
Give me
this time
three
around.
bold measures. Give me three bold measures that you'd like to see from the government. Three bold measures.
Yeah, so I think one would be, I would say that I think I would say in divestment, I think because that is one way, and it has to be front loaded. I think if even if they announce it, they have to do it quickly. Otherwise, I think it usually, I think you keep struggling towards the end. So I would say divestment is difficult, but you need to move much faster on divestment slash privatization. The second is I would like to see bold measures on the climate change so that you actually establish your position as a very responsible economy towards moving towards addressing the climate issues. So I think these are the two measures I think I would can make the budget stand out. I mean,
and cut down on subsidies.
yeah, I think that expenditure restructuring, as I mentioned earlier, I think is a part of that. I think the subsidy bill has to be done in a very calibrated and a very and a targeted manner. I think that I believe will be the underlying theme in this budget. That's my sense. So how will they balance all these? I think is always, every budget is a balancing act. I haven't seen any budget which is not a balancing act. So this budget too is a balancing act of a different kind. I mean, so right now, as I said, I think we need to cash in on some of the strengths that the economy is displaying at even in these times of extreme difficulty globally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Overall, any advice for the finance minister? Last question.
No, I think I would say that I think they should be on the glide path of fiscal deficit reduction. I think because we are normalizing, so the deficit should also move towards normalization. Second is I think the inflation, particularly in food, can be addressed through some of the climate related issues. I think that I think they shouldn't lose focus on that. I think government has done a pretty decent job of keeping food inflation under check for quite some time. But I think right now we are seeing cereal inflation actually go up very significantly, both wheat as well as rice. So I think taking measures which will pay off not immediately but in the long run. So I would say that don't lose sight of the medium to long run in this budget. I mean, it should not be a budget before the elections or last. It should not be viewed as a last budget. It should be viewed as a continuum.
Okay, that's very good advice, Mr. Joshi. Thank you so much. Just summing it up, the government needs to look at this budget not as their last budget before elections, but as a budget that continues the reform process in the country. Thank you very much, Mr. Joshi, as always, for your insights. Thanks for watching.